Antonio's Story, Legacy of the Fallen, by Charles Olson. Chapter 23, Blood and Disco. Sophia's funeral was a quiet, somber gathering beneath a heavy gray sky, the air thick with grief. Mono stood apart from the family, hands shoved deep into his pockets, head bowed low. He watched Don Arturo, Sophia's father, silently shaking hands, embracing friends and family. The old man's face was aged with sorrow. Mono felt his chest tighten and his heart twist sharply. Afterward, Mono wandered the streets alone, compelled toward Don Arturo's restaurant, El Tragadero. The windows were dark, blinds pulled tight, the door marked closed. A handwritten note taped crookedly to the door read, "Closed in mourning." Mono hailed a cab and gave Sophia's apartment address. As they neared, his pulse quickened. The crime scene came into view. Sidewalks stained dark, glass fragments still scattered like tears frozen in time. A growing memorial had formed, overflowing with bright flowers, cards, burning candles, and whispered prayers. A crowd stood mourning, heads bowed in solemn unity. "Keep driving," Mono told the driver, voice thick. He wanted to pay his respects, but knew his presence would only open fresh wounds. The cab rolled slowly away, leaving Mono wrestling with a crushing wave of guilt and anger. La Oscuridad. That night, Antonio and Mono met at El Chivo's new club, La Oscuridad, a glittering jewel amidst Juárez's faded downtown. By day, it served as Chivo's headquarters. By night, it transformed into a throbbing hive of music, dance, money, and vice. Neon signs cast electric blues and reds onto the street, drawing crowds of Mexicans and Americans eager to lose themselves. Inside, a sea of bodies moved beneath flashing lights, lost in a pounding disco rhythm. Upstairs, El Chivo sat enthroned in his office, a luxurious den of power and excess. Mirrored walls offered panoramic views. Below, the packed dance floor surged. Outside, the pulse of Juárez flowed endlessly. The marble floors shone under Persian rugs, while mahogany-accented black leather furniture whispered authority and prestige. El Chivo greeted them warmly, his expensive new suit sharp, a thick Cuban cigar in hand. "Come, see what loyalty brings," he said, gesturing expansively from his carved mahogany desk toward the window. He pointed out the bar, the exits, and the vigilant doormen, then tapped a remote, cycling through security cameras that blanketed the club. "Security is power," El Chivo intoned, settling back into his leather throne. He motioned for Antonio and Mono to sit. "Antonio, your loyalty is deeply appreciated. Mono." Chivo paused, sincerity heavy in his voice. "I'm sorry about Sophia. The cartel mourns with you." Mono nodded silently, eyes cold and distant. Chivo took a long draw on his cigar and exhaled slowly. "The Tijuana cartel ordered the job. Javier Arellano Felix claims it was meant as intimidation, not a hit. He's given us names and locations as an apology." Mono sprang to his feet, a rage they'd never seen in him boiling over. "I'll handle them myself." Antonio looked up sharply, noticing a hardness in Mono he'd never seen. El Chivo studied Mono carefully, then nodded slowly. "Then it's yours." Vengeance is his. The first hitter was Jorge El Flaco Reyes, a wiry ex-boxer known for his brutality. They found him stumbling out of a dive bar, drunk and vulnerable. Mono surged forward, fists exploding into El Flaco's face, ribs cracking under heavy blows. Antonio calmly asked questions: who hired him, why they targeted Sophia. Bloodied and battered, El Flaco wept, pleading for mercy. Mono stood back, breathless, watching the man's desperation. "Please," El Flaco whispered, spitting blood. "I didn't mean to." Mono silenced him with a bullet. Next was Miguel El Lobo Ortiz, an arrogant thug from Tijuana who'd built a reputation on violence. They cornered him in a decrepit motel room. Mono's fists were relentless, eyes devoid of mercy, as Antonio interrogated coldly, extracting every scrap of information. El Lobo, defiant at first, eventually crumbled, begging pathetically for his life. "You'll never see me again, I swear." Mono stared blankly, then ended his plea with a single shot. The last was Juan El Gato Hernandez, a slippery gambler who had tried to flee to the border. Dragged from a gambling den, he trembled in the desert darkness, face pale with terror. Antonio's questions cut sharp, efficient. Mono's blows came harder, angrier, his fury unchecked. "You took everything," Mono growled, pressing the gun to El Gato's temple. The hitter sobbed, voice shaking. "I didn't know she would be there, I swear. Please." Mono pulled the trigger without hesitation. Afterward, Antonio saw the change clearly. Mono was no longer just his friend. He'd become a force, darkened and defined by vengeance. As they drove silently back toward Juárez, Antonio understood that roles had shifted. Where Mono once restrained Antonio's anger, now Antonio would have to hold back Mono's fury. The city lights blurred outside the windows, and Antonio silently braced for the storm brewing at his side. Blackout. Back at La Oscuridad, Mono sat heavily at the bar, ordering drink after drink. Antonio watched him carefully, concern etched into his brow. Mono drank recklessly, his eyes unfocused, lost in memories of Sophia. Suddenly, someone on the crowded dance floor bumped into Mono, sending his drink crashing onto the bar. Mono erupted, spinning around, face twisted with rage as he pulled his gun, shouting threats at the stunned patrons around him. "Mono! Enough!" Antonio lunged forward, gripping Mono's wrist tightly, wresting the weapon from his grasp. He pulled Mono back roughly, scanning the club anxiously as El Chivo quickly emerged from his office, his face a blend of anger and urgency. Chivo motioned sharply for Antonio to bring Mono upstairs. Antonio half-carried Mono, who was nearly incapacitated by drink and grief, up the stairs and into Chivo's lavish suite. Mono slumped onto the plush leather couch, murmuring and sobbing Sophia's name until exhaustion overtook him. Antonio gently adjusted Mono's position, his heart aching at the broken state of his brother. He took out his cross, closing his eyes briefly, whispering a desperate plea to a god he wasn't sure was listening. He would do anything to save Mono from this darkness.